I really want that. Password.
Anything is possible with Dreams, a package that's perhaps better seen as a tool for creation rather than being a ready-made gaming experience. 7 years since its reveal at E3 2013, it's amazing to think we now have access to the full build, complete with a beautifully designed level from its developer Media Molecule. This is for sure the one to check out as soon as you load the game, to see the Dreams engine firing on all cylinders. It's also the focus for our first look today, as we pick apart how base PS4 and PS4 Pro handle the technology. Though of course, it only represents a fraction of what you can do. There's plenty to enjoy by browsing user-made levels, platformers, bullet hell shooters, art projects, and even recreations of games like PT or Mario 64 are up for grabs. Much of this has of course been in gestation since the game's early access began a year ago, and so at launch, this dream surfing mode is packed with stuff to see and do. Art Stream then, this is the big one, but what is it? Simply put, Media Molecules designed a bold showcase for the engine. Lasting between 2 to 3 hours, it chronicles the travels of a down and out double bass player. Having just broken up with his band, you at first use a floating imp on screen, controlled through the DualShock's gyro controls, to guide him between places in a point and click style puzzler. You get multiple dialogue options and use that imp to twist, pull and move objects around to discover secrets. There's much more to it though. As you go, you dip into his childhood dreams, a form of soul searching that manifests in new playstyles. Jumping from racing segments to rhythm games to platformers, Media Molecule tries its hand at pretty much every genre of game, and with impressive transitions between each two.
Inspiration is here. Now we're flying.
Let it be said, the production quality here is a league ahead of anything else in Dreams right now. There's actually more minigames built by the developer online, but nothing to match Art Stream's scale and scope. The only real regret here is that it took just 2 hours to beat. The soundtrack is a clear highlight though, with whole levels built around high production tracks. Character animations also excel past the online competition, plus the sheer variety in playstyles all bear the mark of a team at the top of their game. This will be very hard for users to match. We'll be talking more about Dreams from a pure engine tech perspective in a future video, and how users stretch these tools. But for now, let's use the main adventure to test how PS4 and PS4 Pro stack up, and the ways between them to enjoy the game. No matter how you play, Art Stream boasts a gorgeous painterly quality. Combined with light propagation techniques, the final results are almost CG film-like at points, with the pass of temporal anti-aliasing adding that extra lick of polish. It's worth noting every level loads in very quickly too. You get seamless jumps between every segment of the main adventure, perhaps a second of darkness, yes, but no loading screens. Running on patch 2.03, part of this is likely down to the purely engine-driven nature of it all. Dreams only needs a 10GB install after all, with every object and effect in the game rendered by the GCN cores on PS4, rather than being pre-baked. It's essentially async compute to the game. Conceivably, some of the files bulking out that 10GB install will likely be the voiceovers and intro movies. So with all that in mind, all eyes are on the renderer, and how it's set up on the base PS4 and Pro models.
You ain't got that.
First up, PS4 Pro owners are in luck. You get 2 rendering modes here. Go to the visuals menu and you've the luxury of a better resolution or better frame rate option. Base PS4 only has 1 default setting, and so that gives us 3 rendering setups to test today. As far as image quality goes, every platform deploys dynamic resolution scaling, DRS, but with different max targets. On base PS4, that's 1920 by 1080 at best, but I've seen it scaling down to the 900p mark. As for PS4 Pro in its frame rate mode, you're also getting 1080p at best. However, drops under that resolution are less common than the base model overall. If we're to stack the two up against each other, there's a clear benefit to playing on Pro this way. Plus, you do of course get the much improved performance on the right side, which I'll go into more detail about later.
Don't worry, Lance Swing. This time we're not letting you out of our sight.
What about PS4 Pro's resolution mode then? For the premier visual experience, this really is the one. A native 2560 by 1440 image is pushed out to 4K displays with a hit to frame rate. All the UI is also upgraded across the board to 1440p. And if we pit this against the base PS4 model, there's a few other subtle changes, it appears, to the quality of the lighting and ambient occlusion. It might simply be down to the way the TAA or motion blur work, but there's simply more dithering to light points on base PS4. Notice the speckling artifacts on the headlamps on the road here, smoothed out on Pro on its resolution setting. Meanwhile, the frame rate mode on Pro happens to strike a kind of midway point in image quality in this sense, and it's still much improved over the base PS4. All round, the drop off in presentation on base PS4 really sticks out in our stream. Those drops to 900p stick out after playing on either of the PS4 Pro's modes, and the hard work put into the platformer stages especially is undone a bit with that drawn out camera. Now, there's a logic behind how and where these res drops happen. All platforms run with an unlocked frame rate. However, when the game's being taxed hard, it simply locks all performance to 30 FPS. The trick from here is, if the Dreams engine is still being strained at that point, it then starts cutting into the image quality, dropping to lower resolutions to help the GPU along. In other words, DRS is the safety net for when the engine bottoms out at 30 FPS, and it happens more often on base PS4. There's also a point at which the DRS stops dropping to lower values in resolution, and we simply see it manifest as sub 30 FPS performance. Let's see this in action. Whole segments of play on base PS4 run at 30 FPS with perfect frame pacing. From the opening hub to most segments involving side-scrolling shooting, jumping between platforms, and even driving, it's pretty solid. Partly, the perceived effect is helped by the TAA and motion blur, the latter of which, by the way, can be disabled in the menus. And most of the time, ArtStream runs like a game optimized for the base unit. Then there are the extremes. Any look upwards to the sky, like this camera pan to the giant broken head, can unlock the frame rate to near 60 FPS. It's a sign of the game running fully at 1080p and with GPU headroom to spare, with very few GPU elements on screen to buckle it. Not to mention there's a whole bullet hell shooter which just runs at around 35 FPS. Again, not much going on in the background, and there's only a handful of enemies floating around in the foreground. Base PS4 has another side though. It's the worst performing hardware for Dreams, and it seems that mostly comes to bear in the driving segments. Expect lurches into the high 20s at times, nothing too glaring, but a sign that even on Media Molecule's showcase level, there's a stress point. Also, the menus, showing the entire breakdown of ArtStream, somehow tax the performance to the mid-20s on PS4 here. Fans of the developer's work on the Little Big Planet series will find themselves right at home with the incredible UI across the game. And it's seriously a highlight, but on base PS4 it can struggle. Thankfully, in the handful of user-made games I've tried, I do notice a trend of games running up 30 FPS at least, like this Dark Souls-esque game here, and even this Resogun remake. Moving to PS4 Pro next, let's take a look at the resolution mode first. Even running at 1440p, the platformer stages starring the Fox and Bear duo get a frame rate boost to around 35 FPS rather than being rigidly fixed at 30. It's a sign that the resolution isn't being dropped often at these points too. No need for DRS means we keep that 1440p image after all. Impressively, the bullet hell segment, which ran at 35 FPS on base PS4, now gets pushed to 45 on the Pro, a big upgrade. Sadly, there are still plenty of lengthy stretches at 30 FPS across the game, and even user-made levels run at exactly that. But overall, I'd say this is still the best compromise between the ways to play. Improved image quality and smoother performance. There's a high chance we'll see levels that push the engine and PS4 Pro harder, which might lessen this advantage. We'll very likely see sub 30 FPS readouts on Pro with the extreme levels made out there, but for ArtStream, this is the way I'd play, honestly. Perhaps a 30 FPS lock option would have been ideal for people not keen on those frame time jumps. It's clear after playing the whole adventure that we're never just quite locked at 60 FPS this way, but the fluctuations are at least hidden by the motion blur.
Imagine you're on a beach, the waves gently lapping at your toes. In the distance you can see a little bird. It doesn't have a care.
The last mode to check is of course the one for better frame rate on Pro. True to its word, this boosts performance again to over 50 FPS in the Fox and Bear platform stage, and we're practically holding a full 60Hz refresh in the side-scrolling shootout levels. Across every area I've tested, PS4 Pro's GPU power is simply being pushed to render a native 1080p, but delivers more frames in every instance. Is it worth it? Well, perhaps for the handful of levels that do lock at the top number. The music rhythm sections fall into that category, for example. Even so, Media Molecule still lets it waver up and down the scale for most of the others. We're in the 45 FPS no man's land quite a lot of the time, and at that point it doesn't feel all that refined. In theory, there could be user-made stages built to harness Pro's higher GPU spec, especially combined with this performance mode. Seriously, for stuff like the Resogun remake, it'd make a world of difference to realising its vision. 30 FPS really doesn't cut it on base PS4 for this type of game. What we're left with right now though is still in between two targets most of the time. Certainly the main adventure feels best tailored for a locked 30 FPS experience if you're using the resolution mode, but we're getting glimpses of huge potential for game types that benefit from a 60 FPS refresh. At least we have the option though, and it's really to be welcomed. Beyond the art stream adventure, there's countless great ideas being thrown around in that dream surfing mode. Some are more elegantly executed than others are silly, short-lived, but still fun to dip into given the near-instant loading speeds. Oh, and I can't help but spot a big trend in simply making, well, food. Breakfasts, hot dogs, everything. It's become a strange obsession for the community and I absolutely love it. Some of these experiences go the extra mile as well in terms of delivering a granular level of detail. I mean, who knew? A full English would run at 35 frames per second on Pro. All of this is the tip of the iceberg though as to how the engine runs and what can be done with it. Something we'll be exploring with a future video. For now though, the pecking order is clear. Dream squeezes by on base hardware, but going by Artstream as an example, if you want your creativity to run with fewer limits, PS4 Pro really is the tool you'll need for the job. But that's all I have for today for this quick look. If you did find this analysis useful or insightful in any way, please let me know by liking or subscribing. And don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. And to get in touch with me or the team directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.
So clearly. I was 8 years old when I first saw her playing in the park with those gross caterpillars. I knew from that moment that we'd be best friends.